Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This is probably going to be one of our most requested videos of the summer. It is our top 5 Declan Rice replacements as the number 6. But yeah, he's going to Arsenal, £100 million. So there's only one thing that we can really play, and that is...
Here we go. Money talk. Here comes the
money. A lot of money to spend this summer for Tim Steiden coming in July. So
that's going to be a copyright issue.
Yeah, hopefully not. But you know what? It's worth it for that. He's bringing us a load of money, and hopefully we're going to spend it wisely. And we're going to try and break down our top 5 replacements right now. And we're going to have one kind of more perhaps unrealistic signing that we'd like to kind of the dream signing, 2 kind of very attainable signings if we play it right, and then 2 sort of like younger ones that could potentially come in with another better player as an 8, so room for development. So without further ado, lads, I guess we need to start with the dream signing, the one that probably most people will have on their list. He's on our list. Kefan Thuram of OGC Nice, a very, very good player, a very highly rated player, in talks with Liverpool at the moment, but it looks like that's still not progressing as much as maybe people thought, which could potentially open the door for a club like West Ham to swoop in and try and get him at a kind of fixed rate. So without further ado, Mike, tell me about Thuram to start with, because I know he's been on the top of your list for a while now.
Yeah. So the reason why it'll be difficult in the first place. Obviously, Liverpool are in for him around about €40 million. Shouldn't be a problem at the moment with the influx money we're going to get. But the hold up is Ratcliffe is currently in pursuit of Man United. So arguably, if he takes Man United, the opportunity for him to go to Liverpool could completely fall flat on his face, because he's unlikely to want to do a direct competitor. Now, as to why we want to sign him, or why we think he should absolutely be the player you go and get. One, he started off as a 6. Kind of went from Monaco, moved then over to Nice, and kind of played as a bit of a 6. And then he's kind of, as he's grown and developed as a player, he's become this more, I guess, box-to-box kind of player who is physically an absolute machine. He is, I don't want to say a monster, because there's negative connotations to that, which is always said around players of colour, and I don't want to go down that route of those types of descriptions. But he's an absolute machine of a player. He is physically, he is incredible. 6'4", has an incredible stride. Players bounce off him left, right, and centre. He's 22 years old. Obviously, his father, we all know who his father is. It's World Cup winner Lilian Thuram, who was possibly one of the best right backs I've ever seen growing up. And yeah, he's been a fantastic player for Nice this year, in a team that struggled and not really got going at all. He's been the by far standout player, and the fact that the likes of Liverpool are looking at him isn't a reflection of just how good he is.
Well, let's look at kind of the data behind him, Mike, and just sort of talk me through like the strengths of him and obviously some of the weaknesses that maybe come with that. And as you mentioned before, scout reports are put together, and this is what's come out. So talk to us, about these statistics in particular.
Yeah, so let's go to negatives. There ain't actually many negatives at all. There are genuinely no significant negatives with him. I know people will probably look at the defensive stats on the bottom kind of end and go, oh, they seem quite low. But again, that's because he's been freed up in which to be that dynamic kind of destroyer with the ball. When I look at him, we talk about Declan Rice. He can be every bit as good as Declan Rice. And that's not me just saying that, because Declan's going and all that. He is genuinely that good. Like, he could come into West Ham's midfield and absolutely dominate. And the way he can carry the ball is something that we talk about Rice. And he is so physically powerful. Has 8 assists this season. I think it's only 1 goal. So obviously he's down on Deckers in that respect. But 8 assists, which is, I think, Rice has got maybe 2, maybe 3 off the top of my head. So again, he's so creative. He again plays on that left-hand side of midfield, centre midfield, like Declan Rice does. And if you just got to look at that heat map on the top there, most of his work is done very much centralised, obviously, in that left-hand kind of inside channel, but also he gets forward with such regularity. Physically dominant in the air, but what do you expect from someone who's 6'4" as well? So he does also have that element about him. And at 22, he's only going to grow. If you could buy him for 40 to 45 million euros, I can guarantee, you can almost guarantee that within a year in the Premier League, if we buy him ahead of, say, Liverpool, so we manage to pull off, it will be a coup. Like, there's no, like, it is a coup.
Why is the dream signing, right?
Absolutely. A bit like how we were about with Onana last season. It's a player that would represent a coup because of the future revenue.
Yeah.
In a season, if he plays well in a season, you can guarantee the next year you can easily ask for £80 million. It's not even an if, but, or maybe. A good season next year in the Premier League for a club like us, you could immediately sell him for double your wage. You could buy him for 50 million. It's not a risk. Even 60 million, in my opinion, is not a risk for him because he's going to, or can be, I don't want to say he is because obviously, you know, from football side, but he could be that good.
I think the big positive is as well, he's only 22 years old, and, you know, like you mentioned there, the room for development and those statistics and how he's actually playing at such a young age is such a draw. So with that kind of in mind, Sloth, what's your opinions on Thuram? Do you kind of share the same vision as Mike in terms of, you know, how good of a signing this would be?
Yeah, I think it's anyone who follows me will know that he has been my long-term, like, just number one pick by far and away. I still think we should have moved for him last season above anyone else, really. And I got a bit of flack for saying that I would have moved for him above Paqueta, just because I think having that dynamism in midfield is absolutely insane when you consider, like, the way that I describe him physically is he's like Jonah Lomu. If you ever watch Jonah Lomu play for the All Blacks, he just has players bounce off him. As soon as he gets in his stride, he gets up to speed. Nobody can take the ball off him because he is just an absolute wrecking ball.
And actually, that's one of the big things that people often say about the Premier League and players coming into the Premier League is, can they, you know, cope with the physical demands? So immediately we don't have that worry. Yeah,
and I think when we talk about, you know, he's slightly down on goals in terms of comparison to Rice, I think in a Moyes side as well, that's, you know, he's such a dominant force. He could probably add 5 goals to his game a season just from aerial like balls into the box, and it's one of those moves where, yes, it is a bit unlikely with the caliber of club that are linked to him, but he would be by far and away my number one pick.
I mean, the stats kind of speak for themselves there in terms of what he would bring. And, you know, just looking at kind of the chart and the radar for his heat map, like, so similar to Declan Rice. And you know, the kind of key attributes you mentioned of Thuram, very similar to Declan Rice. And he's still got 2 years, you know, he's still 2 years younger. And when we spoke about Declan Rice at 22 years of age, it was around the topic of he needs to add goals. He needs to add a little bit more in the final third. Thuram's not even reached 24 yet. So it's kind of on a similar trajectory in that sense in terms of output in front of goal. So, yeah, that would definitely be the dream signing. So now we've got kind of 2 signings for number 2 and number 3, which are a little bit more realistic, shall we say, than Thuram, but are still pretty difficult deals to do. But if we acted in the right way, they would definitely be able to kind of come to a Europa League team like West Ham. So the first one up is Yusuf Fofana. Obviously an excellent player again that we've, you know, kind of identified. These guys have identified, should I say. So, Sloth, let me start with you on this one. Talk me through Fofana and what he would bring to West Ham playing in that number 6 role.
Well, he is, again, another big athletic unit. He's about 6'2". And we covered him in our previous video. If you want to go and watch that, get a bit more in-depth analysis about him, give that a click. But he is really comfortable on the ball. And he's also got quite a lot of ability in terms of carrying it forward. He is a lot more deeper in terms of where he tends to sit. He's quite happy to kind of drop back towards the defense. But as we mentioned in the other video, he does tend to miss out aerially. However, that's covered stat-wise. but those stats are kind of hidden by the fact that Monaco's defense is so aerially powerful that he doesn't really need to win, or he gets a shout and he might jump for it, but he knows he's not going to win it. So that area of those stats is kind of misleading, I would say. But he is one of those players who I think if he were to come in, because Monaco don't have European football this season, he's rumoured to be available for about 30 million euros, 35 million euros, so a fair price. He's got all the room to develop and really become someone who frees up the likes of Paqueta, even maybe Souček, whoever we get in around them. He gives them the license to roam forward a bit more, while also offering a threat in terms of his size and his physicality.
Mike, what would you kind of give Fofana's key attributes to in terms of the positives he would bring to that West Ham team if he was to come in? And, you know, would he flourish in a Moyes side? I know it's difficult to say. Players will flourish in a Moyes side with the way we play, but with, you know, the attributes we've just seen there, he probably looks like he would do pretty well in that system anyway.
So, okay, within a Moyes side, you don't really have the ball. He flourishes with the ball and has flourished with the ball because that's how Monaco play. So he's shown that he's very good with the ball, absorbing pressure, in fact, inviting pressure to try and play through. So in some respects, that does kind of give some, I guess, level of comfort in a Moyes team in that he can play, when given the ball, he's probably going to have it under pressure each time. So he needs to have that ability to roll players, to drive with possession, to try and play through the lines, you know, quickly, because he's not going to necessarily have much time because of we play such a deep defensive line. Also, he's an incredibly good all-round player. When you look at the stats, you know, attacking, midfield, and so essentially possession and defending, he's pretty much in most cases right up to the the kind of 50% line. And while some of those possession stats, people might go, well, you know, look at the accurate passes, it's only 83%. That's well below. But the problem when always looking at passing statistics, when you're looking at accuracy, is the fact that a great way to always look at Kevin De Bruyne has got a 73%, 75%.
He's always the great example of De Bruyne, right, isn't he?
Yeah. Does that make him a bad passer? No. Fofana is one of those. Again, he's not a bad passer. It's just he has such a high volume of the ball. He is going to give up the ball sometimes, but he's also progressive. He likes to play a lot of progressive passes. His key passes are incredibly high as well above the average line as well. So when you start to look at things like that, you can see then actually, well, he's a progressive player, likes to play forward, likes to put the ball between lines with through balls, likes to try and create it with the key passes. And then you start to go, well, actually, then he takes chances. Like, you know, we've looked at Paqueta. Many have said, he's poor in possession, whereas others will go, well, actually, I'd rather a player pass 9 times because they're trying something and maybe foul, because that one that he does results in a goal.
And it almost won us a trophy. Well, pretty much won us a trophy.
Well, it did win us a trophy. He put through Jared Bowen to score. So
exactly.
Again, you need players who take chances. You can't just always have steady eddies who are happy to run around and put their foot in, because whilst they'll keep you in games, they're not really going to always. They're not the types of players that are going to consistently win you games time and again. Because the Premier League, you need a bit more than, you know, good workers, good strong workers. We've seen many a team go down with workers in their team, and you just can't build in the Premier League with that philosophy.
Well, I mean, to me, it seems like a deal we probably could pull off if we play it right, because like you mentioned, Monaco don't have European football next season. We have Europa League, although, you know, our league finish wasn't great. We're still now, you know, technically European champions. That's got to be some sort of appeal to players, especially playing in London, you know, with the fan base we have. So I think that'd be a great signing. I think, you know, something that's coming in at 24 years of age, you know, is a great, pretty much like for like replacement in terms of player development side of things. We're not losing out on the age difference. I really like that move. Another one of a similar kind of caliber, similar kind of level in terms of how difficult the move would be is someone that's been linked with us for a long time now, Ibrahim Sanagre of PSV. Now, excellent player. Obviously, a lot of people immediately think of Sanagre slightly in more of a negative because he's playing in maybe a lesser league than, say, Liga. So just to start with, for people that aren't really aware of Sangare, I know, again, we did a separate video on him, so go check that out for more in depth. But as a top level view, Mike, let's go with you on this one. What do you kind of see Sangare's best attributes as, and how would he kind of sit in this Moyes team in terms of position?
Oh, he is a physical specimen. Like, he has that Yaya Toure-esque player that kind of stride, in that he eats and gallops up kind of ground almost with ease, because of he has like telescopic legs. Let's be honest, like 6'3", 6'4". Again, another huge unit of a man. But he obviously is the heir of a disease, but he absolutely destroys many in that league with the kind of the way that he can carry. Obviously, with this also, we pushed the line much higher, up by 20%, and this is, again, not just against players in the area of a dizzy. This is being compared against players in the EFL, so the Championship, the Portuguese league, the Austrian league. So essentially, the tier of leagues you would say below the top 5 within Europe. And when you compare what he has done for PSV against those leagues, you can see he's far and away above many players. If you look at his heat map, it also just demonstrates of how much ground he covers in the area of a dizzy. He consistently just gallops and covers ground. He's a very good passer, short range, long range. He can play through the lines again. He can also bring the ball out of himself, and he is good defensively. So it's another one where it's an all-round player. That essentially, when we're talking around number 6s, the players we've talked about are all players that could also be number 8s. They're essentially those hybrid players.
Exactly what Declan Rice is now considered.
Exactly. And we've always said we need 2 players to complement Declan Rice. And we're going to do a video on the other side. We could replace Declan Rice as well. But again, you need to have essentially these all-rounders, because not only do you need to cover much of what Declan's done, you arguably then need to bring in another one to improve on what we have on the other side, and also, again, cover those statistics. So you have to have 2 incredibly solid all-round players to ensure that you have that ability essentially to not drop a level, and in fact actually go up, because within the aggregate of those players, you are covering off those losses, but you're then also improving on those areas where they were maybe weaker. So you ultimately improve. And I think Sangare is one of those players that me and Sloth have wanted way back since he was at Toulouse. So it's someone that we have been baying for a number of years. It's not.
Well, I was just going to come on to you, Sloth. What's your kind of opinion on Sangare in terms of maybe a comparison to, if out of Fofana and Sangare, who would you rather in that situation, and why would you like to see Sangare come to West Ham?
If you had to push me on who I'd choose, I'd probably choose Sangare, just because he is much more defensive minded in terms of how he reads the game, and he doesn't quite pass in the same manner. He hasn't got the same passing range. He's got very good passing range, and he is good on the ball, but he's not quite as comfortable playing those searching balls or through balls as someone like Fofana. However, he is an absolute machine defensively, and he will just gobble up yards and bully opposition. It's sometimes it is hilarious. A bit like I mentioned with Thuram. These players are so big and physical that they just wipe the floor with most players who come near them.
It's like watching David Takeshi's Castle.
It is sometimes it is like that, and he's got a hell of a right foot on him as well. A couple of the goals he scored. But this is one of those things, when he is comfortable shooting, he will unleash a powerhouse. But he's much happier just kind of sitting back, letting players like, if he were to join Paqueta or say Bowen, take the glory and be that defensive sort of anchor. And we're going to cover someone he did play with at Toulouse in a later video, but he really would bring a bit more defensive resolution than I think Rice does, because he does have that license to go forward.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned with Fofana, I think that would also give someone like Aguerd a bit more license to roam and carry the ball, look for his own passing to pick out our attackers. And
I think what I like about, these 3 deals that we've already spoken about is none of them are really going to cut the budget too much. Like we're picking players from leagues where they're realistically not going to cost more than 40 to 45 million euros. So it's like we mentioned, we need 2 players to replace Declan Rice, but we can do it in a manner where we're not going to subsidize quality despite the price, that we're going to have to pay. So for me, it's exciting hearing these names because, we have an opportunity here to really build something stronger and really build something for the future of West Ham. Because how many times have we said it? We are sitting so close to being that next club, that next team to kind of push that top 7 on a consistent basis, just because of all the factors that we have going for us. So yeah, these 3 names that we've mentioned, obviously interesting. So let's get on to 2 names, maybe a little bit lower on the radar. This player actually has been looked at by Arsenal, Liverpool, played in the Premier League last season. So there's that Prem proven quality that Moyes loves. And most people will be more familiar with it. Yeah. And most people watching will be more familiar with this person. So obviously it is Lavia of Southampton, would be available for around 40 million. I think that's the price being quoted. Still only 19 years of age.
In latest reports, I was trying to push for 50 mil.
I mean, they're going to do what we did, right? They're going to push for as much as they can. So in terms of Lavia as a player, obviously, again, 19 years of age, maybe not got the physicality of the other 3 players we just mentioned, but his reading of the game is so good. Really, really good. So in terms of Lavia coming in as a more natural 6, where he played for Southampton, would that be something that interests you guys? Would you be happy to see this happen? And, what do you see his key strengths are in comparison to the other ones we've mentioned so far?
Yeah, go on, you go first, Loth.
I mean, I'd be really happy with it. Like I've kind of mentioned it quite a lot. I do think there's a lot of wiggle room in the price. Whether it's kind of dependent on adding a sell-on clause, because look, realistically, this is a guy who's probably going to play for Belgium and be their starting defensive mid in the future. It's also someone who, as we've mentioned, is garnering a lot of attention from top clubs. And like all the other players on this list, could represent a lot of sell-on fee in the future. So I think when we talk about him, there is that wiggle room in the price, but also he's not going to want to stay in the Championship.
Yeah.
And so he is probably going to want to leave. Whether our bid would attract other suitors to come in is a different issue. But I do think whatever we pay for him, you're probably going to get a return for in the future when they leave. But in terms of him as a player, I think it's one of those where the stats really show that he relies on his work rate. He had someone who, in terms of stealing their headlines in James Ward-Prowse, he did it effortlessly because he would score an absolute thunder bastard of a goal. He would get assists from set pieces, or he'd score them himself. And very much the dirty work was taken away. And although James Ward-Prowse is a bit of an engine and he presses, it wasn't nearly to the same extent that someone like Lavia did a lot more heavy hitting tackles in the middle of the park, which our fans would absolutely love, by the way. But he also reads the game phenomenally well. And
at such a young age as well.
Exactly. So at 19 years old, there's a lot of room to develop. There's a lot of room to push forward, improve on, the goal scoring side of his game, but also improve on areas like his aerial ability, where that's probably the only one that really is the red flag, because he isn't, an absolute powerhouse as the other players are that we've mentioned. He's still very strong. He's still agile on the ball, probably more agile than the others, I'd say. But He doesn't quite have that same ability to just completely bully players.
Mike, what's your kind of opinion on it? Because, you know, we've mentioned before about, you know, we need someone, you know, we need that physicality in the midfield, and just one of Rice's key attributes was his physicality and his, you know, ability to kind of have that presence in midfield where he can almost bully players as well and put in those tackles. Now, Lavia's reading of the game makes it a lot easier for him to do those kind of things, but there is that question mark over whether he has the physicality maybe of the others mentioned and whether he would be suited to our midfield, especially in a Moyes midfield. So how would you kind of counter that? And do you think that he would be able to thrive in that midfield?
I think one way you got to position it is if you look at him and you look at Paulinho, who is apparently adored by Moyes, they map pretty closely statistically. So you would argue, yes, it's Moyes. He's a Moyes type player because statistically they're the same. Physical metrics are important. Other metrics, not so much. But he's a very good defending player. He is 19, so that if it was forced to go to 50, I think for us, because of what we need, you then have to walk away unless you can get that to work in a very highly incentivized kind of bonus structure, or even, as Slav said, a sell-on clause. I think 50 million for us, you would just have to just bow out and say,
yeah,
that's too rich, because we need probably 3 midfielders. We probably have another one going potentially in Souček or Downs. We want a left winger. Apparently, want a centre back.
Yeah.
Potentially going to need a right back as well, because there's talks about Johnson. So we need money spread around. So I think anything that goes north of, say, 45, and I know I said with Thuram, you know, you would pay 60, but I'm not saying that we should pay 60.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that he's a type of player that, as a type of player, with one that you could possibly qualify and go, actually, yes, because there is, I guess, when you watch him play, there appears to be more of a bona fide world-class talent in there than the others. I think Lavia could be that, but Lavia, again, he is so young and he is developing. It's only his first season. It's harder to rationalize that thought process. Then, you know, if you look at Thuram, who's been doing it for years now, well, the past few years in League 1,
yeah,
this is Lavia's first in the Premier League. Again, he comes from really good stock because he was in Man City's youth team. So again, it's a homegrown player, something we haven't mentioned, something that we are going to need throughout the season, because we're losing a homegrown player in Deckers.
Yeah.
This is a fantastic thing to have, because Lavia does have that. There's a lot of, I guess, roughness in his game, but again, he's 19 years old. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to do things that maybe you would deem at times, well, that's just stupid to do that. But again, he's a young player. We've seen Declan do exactly the same thing.
It's part of the learning process, isn't it?
You learn from mistakes, and he has learned throughout the season when he has made those mistakes, how to get around it. And yeah, against us, he was, well, he's by far Southampton's best player. He was a terrible
controlled the midfield for them. He was very good.
Let's be honest, though. Southampton were awful in that game, and no one really played very well. But he stood out. Maybe stood out because of what around him was so poor, but also
probably a bit of both.
But yeah, again, he is also a very good player. Has all of the core attributes you'd want. He's probably, I would say, more refined than Onana, who we wanted last season. So if you take that in mind, it's probably a really good deal.
Yeah.
The price structure needs to be right because of what we need elsewhere. I think.
Yeah, I think that is the big thing, isn't it? Is the price structure, because he is 19 years of age. He's had that one season in the Premier League, and you know, there's other names out there that we've mentioned that don't have the Prem experience, but they've got experience playing in very competitive divisions and performing to a really high standard. So, and
also international players as well. Each one of them, Thuram, Fofana, Sangare, they're all seasoned. Well, Sangare is a seasoned international.
Yeah.
Fofana and Thuram are new internationals, but they are still international players.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a great point, because Lavia, although he's shown in the Premier League, he's, you know, got that potential to become a really, really top player. He's still developing. And is that necessarily what we want to, you know, spend 50 million on when we're losing someone like Rice? And we, like you mentioned, we have to strengthen a lot of other areas. I wouldn't go that high. But yeah, let us know in the comments what you think with that one. And yeah, as kind of a last one, this is definitely a player that most people probably wouldn't have watched, including myself, only a little bit for Middlesbrough last season. and that was Hayden Hackney. Very young player again, similar. I think he's 19 as well, or 19 or 20 years old. What do you guys think of him, Mike? I'll let you lead with this one because this was a player that you put on our list as maybe more of a Lanzini replacement, but he has the key fundamentals to play as a 6 or slightly advanced. So what draws you to Hackney? Because it would be a much cheaper deal to do. And would he be ready to be stepping into that Premier League first team for West Ham?
Yeah, I think the awkward thing is we don't necessarily know where West Ham are going in the market at the moment because we don't have Steynton. We know he likes to buy younger players and to kind of refine them. On top of that, we do have a desire to maybe look more domestic. And we've often had a happy hunting ground in the Championship. And again, we need homegrown. So when you kind of look at those things, it's a deal that makes quite a bit of sense. He had a breakthrough season last year for Middlesbrough. Michael Carrick, put a lot of faith and trust in him. And quite frankly, he absolutely excelled in Carrick's team. Obviously, many players did. But when you look at where he is, in a few of them, he's in like the 90th percentile across a few. But he's by and large around about the 70th plus percentile across almost every metric apart from defensively. This is one that we kind of looked at as probably maybe more as a Souček type of player because it's more box to box. And obviously, just because of just the fact he does play on the left-hand side, which is the right side. He could be someone you consider for either or because he hasn't necessarily had to have a huge amount of defensive work, you could argue. But again, Declan, if you look at Declan's statistics, his defensive work has dropped off this year. So in actuality, his defensive outputs are not always as important. And the one thing that I will always say is the reason why defensive attributes and defensive outputs is so important to West Ham is because we tend to play out of possession. That's where where Moyes is more comfortable. He likes to play out of possession rather than in possession. And people may say, well, that's just wrong. It goes, well, look at how we've been over the last, 3-4 years in those kind of spells with Moyes. We tend to play with sub 40% possession over the course of the season. He's more comfortable out of it than within possession. And someone like Hackney, who just has an incredible engine, I guess you could argue he's Nobelesque in that respect, in that he is a bit of a terrier. He will get in, he will break down kind of the opposition, but he's really good physically quite strong. He's only 5'10", so he's not as tall as Declan Rice, so he's not going to be as dominant in the air, but physically he's a powerful runner, good with the ball at his feet, kind of good eye for a pass and so on. So he's just an all-round midfielder. And if we're looking to spread the cost, we're looking for homegrown, and maybe we're looking to go for a younger kind of squad that we develop, then someone like Hackney, again, who's homegrown, could be a smart deal for us in the long term because he's probably around 20-25 million, maybe a bit like with Alex Scott. So there is potential for that to grow and to become a lot more.
Sloth, what's your opinion on this kind of signing? Because we just mentioned before, we kind of we're going to need 2 players to replace Declan Rice. So is this a signing maybe that would happen if we have the kind of capability to do it maybe towards the end of the transfer window and maybe not a primary target? Or would you like to see us try and go for this and maybe spend more of the money on an 8 rather than a 6?
I think he's a very good player. I would rather bring in that 6. And if we were going to sell Souček, then look to bring in someone else. I think with the money we're going to get for Declan, we have enough to bring in quality players in depth in this midfield. My one sort of drawback from this is that there's a player in the Championship that I also really like, Wharton at Blackburn. And I think if we were to get him, I would potentially just loan him straight back to Blackburn. And I know that's not kind of the ideal fix right away, but you can potentially take a little bit of the cost initially off it because you're loaning him back. But also, we always have a problem with loans. Picking them is terrible. But if you know he's going to be at Blackburn, where he's coming through and alleviating their pressure to find a replacement, I think he's probably going to start like 9 out of 10 games as he should be, really, because of his ability. I do understand that then does take away that homegrown issue. We do need to find someone else to come in, but I do think we can do that across the squad. And we can do it in potentially smarter ways as well. Mm-hmm. But I think in terms of his own playing style, he's a lot more of that number 8. But yeah, he's not really someone I would consider for a 6. As I mentioned, it's I think it would be a bit of a step up compared to the players who we have mentioned, like even Lavia. You know, I think that's something that when you're talking about potentially 25 million, well, it's a big step up in terms of someone who's not played in a top division.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think we need to be very careful with how we spend the money, and we need to bring in players that are ready to come straight into that team and make an impact, because there's no doubt, you know, Rice is going to leave a hole, but it's up to us to make sure we spend correctly and recruit correctly and, you know, nullify as much of that absence as possible from the start, because we've still got Europa League football next season. You know, it's still, you know, a lot of positivity going into the next season. So, yeah, here's our kind of 5 main replacements. I know we're going to give you a couple more bonus ones, courtesy of Sloth, as he had a couple of names in mind. So
before we jump onto those ones, though, what was interesting is that Alvarez still hasn't signed for Borussia Dortmund, and they're struggling to come to terms. They're about £10 million apart at the moment.
One to keep an eye on.
So again, it is one to potentially keep an eye on as that kind of that number 6. If we're looking for an out-and-out 6 who can play a bit with the ball, then, you know, it is one to potentially keep an eye on. I think Ajax will ultimately end up resolving that deal with Dortmund, but at the moment, one team is hesitant to break their transfer record. The other is very much trying to persuade. So it'd be interesting to see if there's some sort of agreement that comes within that one, but that could be an interesting one to watch as we are looking to find midfielders to come in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've done a whole breakdown on Alvarez as well, so go check that out if you're interested about him as a player. But yeah, going on to the 2 bonus ones, Sloth. The first one being Leslie Ugo Chukwu. I think that's how you pronounce it. Might have butchered it a little bit, but yeah, talk to me about him, and I'll get up his scout report card as well, just so you can go through it.
Well, I mean, in terms of the metrics that you're seeing there, they are quite deceptive, because he has been someone getting eased into the Rennes side. You know, he hasn't played a full season, but I think in terms of the potential that he has, he's only 19. He is 6'3". The best player to sort of compare him to that we've seen in the Premier League is Onana, who, you know, did kind of jilt us a little bit, but I totally understand the reasons for that. He is a real powerhouse again, but in terms of his overall ability, you can see him developing in every game he plays. He has got a good first touch. He is a little bit weak in the air at times, which is weird for someone who's 6'3", but I think he's just getting used to senior football. You know, it's Ligue 1 is many things, but at the top of that, it is a physical league. And when we've already discussed a number of the players on here in that similar position who are 6'2", 6'3", also they're grown men. You know, they are strong and incredibly powerful. Yeah, you're comparing a 19-year-old to them.
Yeah,
and he covers ground fantastically. He is that bit more defensive minded in terms of originally he was going to be a centre back in the Rennes youth side and that setup, but he kind of has shown so much joy in carrying the ball that he has been pushed forward. So although he is very raw, I think this would be one that you could potentially look to pick up now, and in the future you'll really see the rewards for that, because he's got such a high ceiling to develop into.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one to keep an eye on. You know, such a young age as well. And like you mentioned, he might be a little bit rough at the moment, but could turn out to be a gem. So obviously, he was the first one. The second one, talk to me about, I think this is how you say it, Elias Kiri. I'm not sure if I've butchered that, but yeah, a much more older player at 28 years old. It's going to be a free agent, I believe, this summer as well, after the end of June. So talk to me about him and why you want to see him at West Ham.
Well, he's someone I mentioned about a year or two ago in the potential additions that we could look at. He does play in the Bundesliga, but the guy is an absolute defensive just master, in my opinion. He is fantastic, covers ground like nothing. He's about 6'2", but he's really strong. He's agile. He is a little bit older, as we mentioned, but that's kind of counteracted by the fact he's a free agent. But it's interesting because he's been linked with Sevilla, and you know, we have European football. We've both had quite poor seasons in the league for our own kind of hopes, but I think if we were to go in, we could offer very generous wages, and you know, without that sort of transfer fee, the guy is the complete defensive midfielder. You wouldn't have to worry about him developing and making mistakes. He's even got goals in his game. And that's something that I think cannot be understated. With someone like Timmy coming in, hopefully taking the reins of the transfers, he should know all about him. He has been at a worse side as well. So he's been at Cologne. But I can't wax lyrically enough about Shaqiri. He is such a defensive workhorse, and he covers so much ground, gets stuck in, but as I said, has a goal as well, and that is something that is priceless.
I mean, the big thing in that transfer is, again, he would be a free agent, so you're saving a lot of money, and he probably wouldn't need to, you know, break the wage bill to bring him into someone like West Ham just because of where he's at the moment. And you know, he's coming in at an age where might be a little bit older than the profile we would want to look for as a generic rule, but you're coming in with, you know, that defensive quality like you mentioned. So yeah, those were our two bonus ones to keep an eye on. And obviously our top 5 list of number 6s to come in and replace Rice. Obviously Alvarez wasn't on the list because we thought he's going to Dortmund, but that now seems like it could be collapsing. So he would probably go into our top 5 as our basic list of 6s. So that was it, guys. We're going to do a part 2 to this with kind of more 8s because we know this is part 1 of 2. We've got the 6s covered. Now we're going to look at potentially the 8s coming in to be the second half of the Rice replacement. So expect that to come very soon as well. And hopefully you enjoyed this breakdown. Let us know in the comments. Do you agree with our picks? Is there anyone we haven't mentioned that you'd like to see come in at West Ham to play in that number 6 role to replace Rice leaving this summer? Let us know in the comments. Leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the YouTube channel as always. And guys, until next time,
Come on,
you Irons.